It is January 20th, 2023, and I'm here today talking about right to work legislation. So, what is it? What is right to work legislation? Well, if you go back to December of 2012, the legislature passed and Governor Snyder signed right to work legislation. If you go back just a few weeks earlier in Michigan history, there was actually a constitutional amendment on the ballot for the people of Michigan to decide whether or not Michigan should prohibit any type of statutory language for enacting right to work legislation, and it failed. And that opened the door for just a few weeks later for the legislature and the governor to enact right to work legislation. So, what does that do? If the state becomes right to work, what's going on? Well, it's pretty simple. The legislation just says that no employee can be fired for not financially supporting or being part of a union. What does the legislation not do? Well, it's important to keep in mind it does not prohibit unions from operating, and it does not prohibit anybody from being part of a union. There's an incentive here that's important to really think about. So if I'm part of a union and I don't feel like I'm getting the representation or the responsiveness that I feel like that I'm paying for, I have the option to leave. And this creates an incentive where the union leadership understands that, and they are more accountable, they're responsive to their members. So that's a really important thing to think about, and how that's a benefit of right to work legislation. There's another, probably even bigger thing to keep in mind, and that is that this is an issue of freedom and individual liberty. Unions obviously offer a lot of services. They bargain for wages and working conditions and many things, and all of that is good. But they also are very political. They spend a lot of money on supporting certain candidates, and if I'm an employee and I don't like the candidates they're supporting, that's would be forcing, at the employee level, and forcing them to pay into political speech that they may not agree with. So there's a really big problem with individual liberties there. And that kind of goes into the next really big thing that happened between when we passed right to work legislation and now. And that was a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision called the Janus decision. So we kind of have to separate two different things here. So there was actually two right to work bills that were passed in 2012. There was a public sector right to work legislation, so that'd be for government employees, and then there was also private sector, which would factory workers or any type of private company that's unionized. It would apply to them. So there's really two different things going on here. But in the Janus decision, it said that public sector unions, public sector employees cannot be forced to participate or financially support a union. So in effect, the entire United States became a right to work nation through that decision. So, if the Democrats pass a repeal of right to work in regard to the public sector, it's not going to be able to go into effect because of that, United States Supreme Court decision. So it's a big deal. So I guess with all that in mind, what are the pros and cons? Like, what's the arguments for and against right to work? Well, let's start with the benefits. There's really two main benefits, and the first is just economic growth and opportunity. If you look at what we saw before and after right to work was passed in 2012, there is a huge difference, and it doesn't. You don't have to have a PhD in economics or business to be able to figure this out. If you're going to grow your business or start your business, where are you going to go? You're going to go to where it's easiest to operate and the most business friendly. If you look at, I have some statistics here. If you look before the 9 years before right to work, our labor force was down 350,000 employees. And if you look at the 9 years after, we had 90,000 more people working, 90,000 greater labor force than we had before. If you look at average income, the 9 years before, our average inflation-adjusted income raised 0.6%, so barely anything at all. and in the 9 years after, it almost raised 22%, just under 22% wage increase. So that's huge. And then if you look at the state level, our statewide revenues were down for the 9 years previous, over 17%. In the 9 years after, statewide revenues had increased over 15%. So, and the list goes on. There are so many benefits. There's just so much more growth and opportunity in right to work states as compared to non-right to work states. The other benefit, and I've already touched on this, is just it's the right thing to do because of individual freedoms. Nobody should be forced to associate with an organization that they don't choose to, especially in order to put food on the table and feed their families. So it's just very un-American, and I'm glad that the Janus decision was put into place. So at least for the public sector, we don't have that problem anymore. Now, what are the negatives? I think if I had to look at this objectively, the best argument that anti-right to work people will throw out there is what they'll call the free rider problem. And basically what this means is we have in state statute right now that if you're going to be part of a union shop, that they'll have exclusive representation. So, right now, even if I opted not to be part of the union or not to pay dues, the union still is bargaining for everybody that is within that organization. I don't think the solution to that problem is to take away everybody's freedoms and put them back in the union. We can easily, remove the exclusive representation that we have here in the state of Michigan. And if I'm part of a union organization, if I'm working at a place that's unionized, and I'm like, hey, I think I can do a better job bargaining for myself, we'll give them the opportunity to bargain for themselves. Maybe they'll find out, you know what, maybe I should pay union dues because they offer a good service. So I think the solution is to go the other way, give people more freedoms rather than take them away. So that's it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all about this. This is a really, pressing issue in the state of Michigan right now. It's, on the top issues that the Democrats are looking to do to repeal this for this term. So again, bottom line, right to work is good for economic growth. It's good for opportunities for people. And also it helps give people freedom and liberty, which we should all support. So appreciate all your time, and thank you, and God bless.